Disney's live-action Snow White might be on the brink of becoming the studio's most unsettling flop in years. You'd think any remake of the 1937 classic, Disney's first feature-length animated film, would be an automatic box office smash, but warning signs keep piling up. Rumors of an inflated budget, messy production delays, and fierce backlash over casting have all created a perfect storm. Then there's the star of the show, Rachel Zegler, whose public comments seem to spark new controversies every other week. Will the final product overcome these obstacles, or is Snow White doomed to become the cautionary tale that finally halts Disney's live-action remake gold rush? Disney's strategy of turning animated classics into live-action spectacles has paid off handsomely for nearly a decade. From Beauty and the Beast to Aladdin, the studio raked in profits by tapping into fans' nostalgia. But this strategy now appears shakier. The Little Mermaid underperformed relative to expectations, prompting some to wonder if the formula is finally running out of steam. Enter Snow White, an adaptation of the studio's crown jewel, widely regarded as a cinematic milestone. Disney pinned sky-high hopes on this film, yet behind the scenes, costs spiraled far beyond the original $69 million budget estimate. Some insiders whisper that ballooning expenses, pandemic-era reshoots, and production hurdles have pushed the real total closer to $300 million. That means Snow White will have to pull off an epic run just to break even, let alone turn a profit. Early box office predictions were modest at best. Initial forecasts guessed $63 to $70 million for opening weekend. Decent, but not spectacular for a movie that cost this much to produce and market. More recent estimates dropped to the $48 to $58 million range, ringing alarm bells across the industry. If these revised numbers hold, Snow White could end up among Disney's biggest financial misfires in years. In casting Rachel Zegler as Snow White, Disney seemed to be making a statement. She'd wowed critics in Spielberg's West Side Story, had a luminous voice, and carried an outspoken persona that many initially found refreshing. But the original fairy tale describes Snow White as having skin as white as snow, and fans immediately noticed Ziegler's Colombian and Polish heritage would diverge from the iconic depiction. Some applauded the more diverse casting, applauding Disney's willingness to update outdated norms. Others, however, felt the studio had broken from the fundamental essence of the character. Rachel didn't shy away from this debate. She insisted the story belonged to everyone, a universal tale that transcends literal skin color. In her view, new perspectives only strengthen classic narratives. While her remarks resonated with progressive audiences, traditionalists took them as a slight to the original 1937 film. Online forums, social media channels, and even mainstream media latched onto the question: was it fair to strip Snow White of her literal whiteness, or was it high time for a more inclusive portrayal of a classic Disney princess? Then, as chatter about the casting choice exploded, Zegler stepped into deeper controversy. She called the 1937 film dated, pointing out how the story revolved around a princess rescued by a prince who practically materializes out of nowhere. In Zegler's words, her Snow White would be a leader, less about romance, more about self-determination. On one side, fans cheered, calling it a modern retelling long overdue. On the other, loyalists to the original film felt Disney was trashing its own legacy. If you thought revamping a beloved story was fraud enough, Rachel Zegler's political opinions ignited an even bigger firestorm. After Donald Trump's 2024 re-election, she posted on Instagram lamenting another 4 years of what she viewed as divisive leadership. She even said she hoped Trump supporters would never know peace. That instantly struck a nerve. Conservative fans and neutral observers alike criticized her statements, calling them hateful or hypocritical. People who had already been uncertain about her as Snow White now had another reason to back away. Social media lit up with calls for boycotts and demands for Disney to recast. Others compared her situation to Gina Carano's firing from The Mandalorian for controversial remarks. Disney, apparently reluctant to wade into another PR nightmare, remained silent. Zegler eventually apologized, expressing regret for fueling negativity, but the damage was done. Suddenly, any mention of Snow White online turned into a swirling debate over politics, free speech, and corporate branding. Conservative groups claimed the actress was unfit to portray a classic Disney princess, pointing to her public venting as proof she lacked the grace and neutrality they expect from a family-friendly role. Liberal groups saw her as a scapegoat, unfairly hounded by critics. Caught in the crossfire were fans who just wanted a fresh spin on Snow White without all the off-screen drama overshadowing the project. Any version of Snow White naturally invites questions about the seven dwarfs, who've been a beloved part of the story for generations. According to reports, Disney decided to replace them with magical creatures, presumably to avoid outdated or insensitive stereotypes. But this didn't smooth things over. It triggered another uproar, this time from multiple angles. First, you had traditional fans who saw this move as tossing aside yet another iconic piece of the original mythos. Then, there were actors with dwarfism who slammed the decision for erasing what could have been significant job opportunities. Others argued that the original dwarfs were caricatures that needed an update, and modernizing them, or removing them, was simply the right thing to do. This debate added another layer of complication. Now, conversations about the film weren't just about rewriting Snow White, but also rewriting or removing key characters to align with new sensibilities. As with every other step in this production, the decision satisfied nobody completely and managed to anger multiple groups. One sign that Disney isn't entirely confident in this release: the Subdued marketing campaign. Typically, a live-action Disney remake features an enormous red carpet premiere, splashed across entertainment news, with beloved stars giving interviews and generating buzz. But in this case, the studio is dialing back events, limiting access to press, and scheduling fewer flashy showcases. Ticket pre-sales also started later than usual, raising eyebrows within the industry. It's almost as if Disney is bracing for a less than enthusiastic debut and doesn't want to throw money at a major publicity tour that might not yield results. By controlling the narrative in smaller settings, they can sidestep tough questions about controversies or box office expectations. Even the film's supporters find themselves troubled by the lack of build-up. After all, big Disney releases usually dominate pop culture talk weeks in advance. But here, the focus has mainly been on whether the lead actress angered political factions or insulted the original source material. Hardly the happy-go-lucky conversation you want heading into a film's premiere. Let's be frank, a film rumored to cost over $300 million has a steeper mountain to climb than your average blockbuster. Analysts estimate Snow White may need around $800 million worldwide just to break even. The problem is, even some of Disney's hits have struggled to reach that figure lately. Pandemic-related shifts in theater attendance, streaming competition, and franchise fatigue have taken their toll across Hollywood. When early projections were in the mid-$60 million range for opening weekend, the movie seemed it might have a fighting chance. But the adjusted estimates now dropping into the mid-$50 million range indicate that Snow White could tumble short of even modest goals. Even in a best-case scenario where audiences come around due to positive word of mouth, covering a giant production budget is no small feat. And let's not forget, major movies typically rely on global sales. Some international markets might be more open to a modernized Snow White, while others may reject it entirely. If the controversy fails to resonate, or worse, if it repels potential viewers, then a big chunk of that worldwide box office haul might never materialize. Even the top brass at Disney can't predict whether the changes made to broaden appeal will actually translate into ticket sales. Should Snow White turn into a financial fiasco, it would likely force Disney to reconsider its live-action strategy. For years, the studio churned out these remakes, some more successful than others, but they almost always turned a decent profit thanks to brand recognition and nostalgia. Recent misfires could hint that audiences are getting tired of rehashed classics. After all, you can only rewatch so many updated storylines before everything starts blurring together. A flop on the scale of Snow White could be a massive reality check. Could this mean fewer live-action reinterpretations on the horizon? Possibly. Fans who've grown weary of ruined childhoods might cheer. Others could miss seeing new angles on old tales, especially if the next attempt includes a truly innovative twist. Disney might also reassess how heavily it leans on star power, especially if the star brings heated political baggage. In any case, the era of guaranteed billion-dollar hits from Disney remakes could be coming to a close. That doesn't mean we won't see another Moana or Tangled adaptation, but the greenlight process might become more cautious, with fewer sprawling budgets and more attention to how fans will react to radical changes. So where does that leave Snow White? Even with all the negativity swirling around, there's always a chance the final film could charm critics and audiences alike. Maybe the fresh approach to the princess is truly compelling. Maybe Rachel Zegler delivers a standout performance that converts skeptics. If the narrative finds the perfect balance, honoring the original while presenting a forward-thinking heroine, it could surprise everyone with a strong run in theaters. But to succeed, the movie will need to overcome a monumental PR hurdle. Viewers are bombarded with headlines about clashing fan camps, skyrocketing budgets, potential boycotts, and backstage conflicts. Making the leap from problem-plagued production to unmissable cinematic event is no small task. And given the marketing calm before the storm, Disney itself may be unsure how big of an audience is still out there. If Snow White does fail, it won't be just about one actress or one casting decision. It'll be a culmination of every misstep along the way. The constant buzz around cancellations, rewrites, and politically charged arguments might have drowned out the simple magic of fairy tale wonder. And ironically, for a story that once captivated hearts with a message of kindness and innocence, the controversies swirling around this remake stand in stark contrast to its wholesome origins. Ultimately, the fate of Snow White rests on whether audiences are willing to embrace a modern reinterpretation or if they've had enough of the behind-the-scenes drama. The movie's budget demands a thunderous opening and strong legs at the box office, but the controversies have turned off swaths of potential viewers. From Rachel Zegler's outspoken remarks to Disney's removal of familiar dwarfs, each creative choice has provoked heated debate, rather than excited anticipation. Yet fairy tales have always been about transformation and reinvention, so perhaps this new Snow White could still turn things around. A compelling final product might sway skeptics and ignite fresh conversations about progress versus tradition. But if it falls short, and the projections suggest it might, Disney could finally have to reckon with the limits of nostalgia-driven remakes. So is Snow White set to redefine how we view classic stories, or is it teetering on the edge of a very unmagical ending? We won't know until the box office reports roll in. One thing's certain, if the movie does stumble, it'll be a wake-up call for Disney and for Hollywood at large, reminding everyone that even the most iconic tales can lose their shine when the conversation around them turns sour. For a princess whose name once symbolized purity and simplicity, this new chapter of controversy might be the unlikeliest twist in Disney's storytelling legacy.